Alright, what's going on, guys? Today we're looking at a budget Pauper deck. It runs about 1.4 tickets, and it's fairly competitive. It's not a tier 1 deck, and, it's not gonna 5-0 a Pauper league most likely. But it is a deck that you can build for, almost nothing, and be fairly competitive in the tournament practice room. So the deck gets its name from Dauthi Slayer and Dauthi Horror. 2 mana, 2 power creatures with Shadow. You're not going to see a whole lot of Shadow in Pauper, or anywhere really, in any format. So they're basically unblockable. They're pretty effective at bringing your opponent's life total down as quickly as possible. And then backing these guys up, we have your usual suspects when it comes to mono black aggro. We have Vampire Lacerator, Carnophage, and Thornbow Archer. And you can really play around with these ratios. I'm playing 4, 2, and 4. But if you like Carnophage more than the Thornbow Archer, then you can swap those around. Same goes to the Lacerator. The important thing is that they're 1-drops, and they are 1-drops that deal 2 damage per turn. It gets us off to a very aggressive start. And I personally like the Thornbow Archer just for that 1 point of guaranteed damage. Late game, when you top deck like a Vampire Lacerator, it can kind of feel like it's past the point where it can be useful. But the Thornbow Archer, at 1 point of damage, can sometimes win the game, so I like having that as an option. Alright, and then we have 4 Dark Rituals and 3 Gurmag Anglers. Dark Ritual is pretty fantastic. Turn 1, if you can get like 2 Lacerators and a Carnophage out, it's pretty devastating. Even just like a Dauthi Horror and a Lacerator. When you've got 4 to 6 damage on the battlefield before your opponent even has a turn, it's pretty overwhelming for a lot of decks. Especially when it's spread out over multiple creatures, so it can't just get hit by a single removal spell. The Gurmag Angler might seem like an odd inclusion in an aggro deck, but more often than not, it only costs 3 or 4, so it's on curve. It gives us something to kind of stay in the game in late game, and it actually has a kind of a cool interaction with Dark Ritual. Dark Ritual actually counts as 4 mana towards the Angler. You get the 3 mana from the Dark Ritual, and then it's sitting in the graveyard to delve. So if you have 2 Dark Rituals in your opening hand with an Angler, you can actually get it out on turn 1. It's kind of a risky all or nothing play, because if it gets hit with a removal spell, you're kind of just out of gas. But it's kind of a cool interaction, and it's good against green or blue decks that have trouble removing a big creature. Alright, and then next up we have our control. We've got 4 Duress, 2 Disfigure, and 3 Guest's Verdict. Duress is pretty amazing in Pauper. It's been outmatched by Inquisition of Kozilek, and before that, Thoughtseize. But in Pauper, it's still one of the best, if not the best, hand disruption spell that Black has. So the thing about Duress is you definitely don't want to play it on turn 1. This is an aggro deck. We want to get creatures on the battlefield as quickly as possible. It's more of a 3rd to 4th turn play. It's pretty important for hitting, combo pieces, key cards that a deck might rely on. And I also use it a lot for removal, just hitting a removal spell that can hit a creature, just so you can keep a Dauthi Horror in play, for example. This figure's good for clearing away early game blockers, and that's what we want to use it for. We want to mostly use it in the early game to clear the way for Carnophage and Vampire Lacerator and stuff like that. Guest's Verdict might seem like an interesting choice because most people would prefer Chainer's Edict over the Verdict. Chainer's Edict is definitely the better choice if you're planning to go into the late game. Obviously it gives you card advantage because you can play it twice. But this is an aggro deck, and just like the Thornbow Archer, that 1 point of damage can be pretty important. I want everything that I do in this deck to constantly be pecking away at my opponent's life total. So even though Chainer's Edict is probably the more powerful card, I just want to do that extra point of damage because we are trying to kill our opponent as quickly as possible with this deck. And then lastly, we have 4 Blonesplitters and 3 Sign-in Bloods. Blonesplitters are pretty crazy in this deck. I mean, if you get it on a shadow creature, the amount of damage that you can start dealing per turn is pretty stupid. I mean, 4 shadow damage per turn is very difficult to deal with for anyone who doesn't have any kind of spot removal. It will end the game incredibly quickly. And obviously the benefit of it is it doesn't leave play if the creature dies. So every single time you get a shadow creature in play, if you can throw a Blonesplitter on it, it becomes a pretty intimidating threat for most people. Sign in Blood, I don't really need to explain that, right? It's just card advantage. We're looking to refill our hand in the late game. Usually after you have 3 or 4 mana. Most of the stuff in this deck costs 2 or less. So, once you have 3 or 4 mana and a Sign of Blood in hand in the late game, you can draw 2 cards and, potentially play both of them that turn. Anyway, that is the deck. As you can see, the most expensive card is Blonesplitter at 24 cents or 0.24 tickets. The whole deck costs 1.37 tickets. And again, it's not a tier 1 deck. I'm not claiming that it is. There's no claim here that this is the best deck in Pauper or anything like that. But it is a deck, again, that you can build and play in tournament practice and, take down those tier 1 decks fairly consistently. So anyway, I am going to be playing 5 games with this in tournament practice. We'll see how it does. And if you want to see how well this deck does, check the description. There will be a playlist. And I'll see you in the first match.